Hello, I'm Georgiou from the London Psychology Collective. Today we have with us Dr. Patricia Bonnici, and we'll be speaking about Socrates and how his life and philosophies can apply to our everyday lives. Welcome, Patricia.
Thank you, Terry.
So, would you like to start by telling us a little about Socrates?
Well, yeah, Socrates was born in Greece around 469 or so BC up to about 399. And he came from quite simple origins. So his father was a stonemason, his mother was a midwife. And initially his career was also sculpting stonemason. But within this, he always questioned. So his main thing was always asking questions and trying to find answers. And eventually this became his career. So he eventually goes around Athens and he asks people questions and he tries to make them think. And again, I think a key thing about him was that he never actually answered the question. So he didn't ask you the question just to see what answer you gave, and then he gave you the right answer. Your answer to the question in turn became the next question that he would ask you until you found the next answer. He would keep going in this way of asking questions. In some ways, he was very popular, so he gathered quite a gathering, and he has Plato as his main student, and we know most about Socrates through Plato, because Socrates himself either never wrote anything or else we never got anything that he wrote, so we know about him mainly via Plato's writing about Socrates. So in some sense, he became quite popular, and of course popular enough that now, 2,000 something years later, we still know about him. But in other ways, he was very unpopular because of the questioning that he gave. And he was accused of corrupting youth. He was accused of kind of trying to shape the value system of society, of being quite irreverent, of not respecting the gods, of not obeying the laws of society. So he was taken to trial in Athens and he was found guilty by his peers. It's been quite kind of a big court, and kind of all adult male citizens of Athens could be part of the jury. So he was found guilty, and he was asked whether he would withdraw his philosophy, whether he would stop doing this, whether he would stop corrupting you and asking them all these questions and making them doubt kind of values which had been passed down, the traditions of the time, which he refused to do because he believed that not examining things was not the right way. So we kind of have the popular maxim of the unexamined life is not worth living. So for him, it wasn't so much really about what answer we came to, what we thought was the best way of living. It was more about, were you very aware of why you were living in a certain way? Had you questioned yourself? Did you know yourself well enough to know this is why I made a decision? And if after examining yourself and getting to know yourself, you still decided that you wanted to obey the laws of society, then that's what you should do, but it shouldn't just be something taken for granted. So Socrates was sentenced to death, and again, he had lots of opportunities to get out of this. His friends offered to bribe the guards. He had lots of quite powerful friends who could have gotten him out of prison, could have gotten him out of Athens, and he would have continued living his life. But he felt that really he should accept this judgment, that the citizens of Athens had passed their judgment. He had chosen to live in Athens, and therefore he was going to obey what is required of him. And also because he believed that no philosopher should be afraid of death, that death wasn't something which was intrinsically fearful or bad or to be avoided, and that if he did so, his whole philosophy would be called into question. How could he be kind of saying these things, and then when it came his time to accept death, he would avoid it? So he drank his hemlock quite peacefully, apparently, and he died surrounded by friends, which was one of the key values for him. So he always talked about friendship as being something quite important, and he extended it as well to a sense of community. So it wasn't only a small group of friends where they might live in isolation from the rest of society, but he saw it as quite a bigger thing, that society itself could be quite a nourishing place if it questioned itself and if it allowed quite a lot of liberty to its citizens to ask questions and to doubt things.
And following his death, there seemed to be a change in public opinion. If that he was sentenced to death by a democratic system. So popular opinion, at least at his trial, was that he was found guilty, but later things seemed to change. And, you know, the fact that we're talking about him now shows that he became, as someone scholars have commented, such as Livingstone, like the saint and martyr of the ancient world. He became a figure, an iconic figure.
Yeah, I think we have Plato to thank for a lot of that, and I think, you know, a lot of Plato's dialogues, they're sort of written by Plato, but the spokesman is always Socrates, and in some ways I think it's quite difficult really to maybe say what was really Plato and what was really Socrates. Was Plato just playing up to someone who was very popular at the time, or maybe very controversial, and it helped him to become popular himself? But essentially Plato attributes all of this to Socrates having said it, and he pretty much picks up the Socratic method or the Socratic dialogue, which is essentially, when we read Plato, we have a lot of Socrates asking questions to people and people providing answers, and Socrates asking questions again. So he keeps questioning people's beliefs of, why do you believe this? And you give him an answer. But why do you believe that? But why is that important? But how is that significant? But how is that affecting your life right now? And in some ways, this has become the very basis of psychotherapy, really, where the therapist doesn't really give you any answer, but just asks you and tries to get you to a place of thinking about things and wondering, is this truly me? Is this what I think? Is this what is important to me? Or is this what my family has told me is important, what society, what I've just made an assumption about, but I never really thought about, and this is what is making me unhappy. So I can change my beliefs, and I can, you know, therefore change my understanding of things, and I can become happier. So this method of asking questions has become, I think, quite powerful, and it's something we can do to ourselves. We can ask ourselves questions about assumptions that we make and things that we take for granted in the world, and that increasing our self-knowledge might get us to a place where I can make better decisions because I know who I am, I know why I'm like this, I know what I believe, I know what's important to me, and I can base decisions on that rather than on just kind of random assumptions that I have.
So the idea of examining ourselves or our views can help to facilitate an exploration of ourselves, so to know ourselves better and to know why we believe what we believe, to know why we have certain values, why we have certain beliefs, or perhaps in modern life why we strive for certain things, like to work in certain jobs or to try to accumulate money or status or acknowledgement in some area. But so this self-exploration.
Yeah, and it can hopefully lead us to make better choices in all of those. So, you know, if it's my job, I don't just do something because I somehow fell into it, or because, in school I studied mathematics, so then I went to university and I kind of studied more mathematics, and then I ended up being an accountant or an economist because it just, I just happened to have the right subjects to study this subject in university, to do this sort of job, but to really question ourselves and see what are my values and what are my interests, and hopefully that will lead us to positions where we are happier with our lives, that we know what is right for us, what really feels right for us, rather than what looks good or what pays the most or what we just happen to fall into. Everybody in my family is a doctor, so I'll become a doctor because my father and my grandfather, my great-grandfather were all doctors, and that's the expected tradition of what I'm going to become. So I think it is this question is kind of tying both together about knowing thyself, and the unexamined life is not worth living should ideally lead us to a place where we can really hold on to our values. This idea that if something isn't truly ours, it will be shaken by the Socratic method. We'll come to the place where we don't really have a good answer anymore, and we kind of go like, oh, maybe that isn't a real belief of mine, then maybe I should change this belief. But some beliefs will come down right to the bottom where we really see that this is fundamental to who I am, and those are the beliefs which are worth holding on to, which is what sort of Socrates does at the end, that he thinks that precisely the questioning is his most important value. This constant idea of I don't know anything, therefore I always question and I always hear what other people have to say, and I'm not willing to stop questioning. So maybe many other things I'm willing to say I don't know anything about, but I know this is of great value to me, and then I can stand up, you know, and that might make me very unpopular or might make my life extremely difficult. But is it something which is worth it for me, really?
So there's the message, pardon me, about unpopularity. Some scholars have picked up on this in the story of Socrates' life. In some ways, is a story about standing against the views of others. So, as you say, examining our views and knowing ourselves, but then also being comfortable or accepting that maybe this will make us unpopular, or some people may not be very happy about the choices that we make if they don't fit what's gone before.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that can be very hard, and it might take a lot of courage or a lot of strength to keep going with that if you feel that your choices are quite unpopular, especially to people who are important to you, to close family or friends, partners. And it might be a very difficult decision to make of, do I want to be true to myself? Do I want to be, in a sense, maybe authentic, to use another word, to what I truly believe or to what my values are? Or do I want to be popular if they can't both go together? So it's not always an either or, sometimes we can have both. But what happens when we get into that position where I can either be popular, I can go with the flow, I can have maybe quite an easy life, but I might not be truly happy, or I might have a sense that I'm not quite living up to what I really wanted to do or what I really wanted to be, or I can follow that part, but it might mean that I might have to suffer for that, and how do we make that decision?
And I think that in modern life that's a decision that people struggle with, the trade-off between what may seem easier or more conventional and may bring conventional rewards, and then the search for something perhaps more original, but it's less defined, and so there's less of a structure, there's less of an obvious path to follow. So it takes, I suppose, a journey which starts from within, in the kind of therapeutic kind of language, that starting from within ourselves, knowing our values, then guides our choices, I suppose, as opposed to having them borrowed.
Yeah, and I think, you know, with jobs, this might be quite a clear difference, that I suppose a job can have two main values. It has the value that, of course, it pays me, and therefore it allows me to live. And depending on how much money it pays me, it gives me a certain lifestyle of how many holidays I can take or what sort of things I can buy. And then there's the other level of, well, how satisfied am I? Do I enjoy my job? Does it give me a sense of fulfillment? Does it make me want to actually go to work in the morning? And some people are lucky that they find jobs which pay quite very well, really, and they also find highly fulfilling, and this is really the place that they want to be. And other people might feel that they find themselves in positions, well, I have a great job, it really pays quite a lot of money, I don't want to give up the money because I love my lifestyle, but I hate the job, and I'd much rather be, whatever, I'd much rather be a photographer, or I'd much rather work within the charity kind of field, but that doesn't pay enough, and I'm not willing to kind of earn a minimum wage or a very low salary to do this. And I think that can be a very difficult choice to make for a lot of people.
I think so, especially when it seems like there are extreme differences, like absolute ends of the spectrum, either very highly paid but unfulfilling, or very badly paid and very fulfilling. And, you know, I suppose people are trying to find a trade-off, aren't they, between the two in modern life. And so that's the area of work. But if we think also about the area of social, relationships, I suppose, Socrates was willing to question others and perhaps at times upset them in the interest of searching for the truth. He was more interested in the truth. Now, that may or may not apply to people's social relationships in terms of helping others search for truth, but something about being authentic, as you said, may then affect people's relationships and whether they're willing to be, either unpopular or to not always please those around them. It may distance them from certain people, and it may draw them to others, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think, that is a very big reality. In Socrates' own life, he was sometimes known as a gadfly. He's just constantly stinging people, and if that's the role that we choose to take on in life, of constantly questioning those around us, well, I think for many that won't be very popular. If they meet you Friday night at the pub and you're constantly questioning all their decisions and all their values, and why do you do this, and why haven't you left this job yet, or so I think it can actually make it quite difficult. And I think therapists do that quite a lot, but therapists are kind of being paid to do that, and you went there because you weren't happy with something and you were ready for a change, or you were wondering about what am I going to do, my life isn't very good right now, and I want some help to do this, and also because this might be a more contained space where you're there for 1 hour and you know exactly why you're going there, rather than you have a friend or a partner or some family member who's kind of constantly at you and constantly asking those questions. But I think they're very important questions sometimes to ask, to really examine who we are, why we're like this, what we want to do, where to go from here.
And I think, okay, so aside from questioning people, about their own views, this idea of being authentic when with them, I suppose, can be challenging in itself. That people may find the difference that they see between yourself and them in terms of values and views, they may find it challenging. And in a sense it can raise certain issues. And again, I suppose we have the trade-off between keeping relationships as they are, or keeping winning the esteem of others and being valued by others, versus holding some of our own views.
Yeah, I think you can see that, especially when we do change, maybe quite dramatically. Like, for example, with the job again, if I was a city banker and I decided, this pays me really well, but it's really unfulfilling and I want to leave and I want to do something completely different, will you still be able to fit within that world if you've socialized with friends from work, or that was kind of your main life, really? How does that work then once you've left that, and once you might have taken on a new set of values, and you start questioning, I don't really enjoy doing that anymore, I can't really afford to do that anymore, and how will that affect your own social relationships?
Yeah, so I suppose it's about reevaluating what's most important. And I suppose in our work that's often a feature, isn't it? The gains of remaining as we are versus the gains of making changes. And there's always obviously an aspect of loss. If I gain something new, or if I change something, I may lose certain things. And I suppose it's about evaluating how important those things are.
And do we want to go to the pain of all of that? Because change will always be painful. Even if it's something we want, it's often not that easy to just go ahead and get it. And I guess that might be some of the idea why Socrates often used the word midwife. It is a deliverance of something, but it doesn't come easy. It comes to quite a lot of suffering, and it comes to quite a lot of determination and pushing, essentially, to really make a change, and to find a new sense of who we are. So in a sense, we're delivering ourselves, and we're looking within, as you said earlier, to see who am I really, and am I brave enough to bring this inner part of me to the outside world, so the outside world can see it, and if the outside world sees it, can criticize it, or can reject it, or it can, and am I willing to do that?
Yeah. There was a quote I read from Socrates earlier, I won't remember it word for word, but he mentions how his method, the Socratic method of questioning people, causes anguish often among people as they start to re-examine their views, and that it can be quite uncomfortable and they can be angry about it in a way. And it made me think about when people go on a journey of exploration, or if they come to therapy and they start to examine their views, they may come in quite an anxious state, or the examination may cause anxiety. But how, as you said, there's some value often in going through that pain, in that then we find ourselves delivering, in a way, in the kind of midwifery sense, delivering something new, but that's, as you say, a painful process often.
Yeah, and I think, anguish is quite a key term within all of this, that it does produce a lot of pain, it does produce a lot of anxiety, but hopefully at the end you get something which is quite worth having. I think this is Kierkegaard carried quite a lot of Socrates into sort of relatively more modern philosophy, because Kierkegaard was very interested in anguish, so he was quite interested in this idea of Socrates, of the pain of looking inside and the pain of being different, the pain of really standing apart and saying, this is what I believe, this is who I am. Some people might love me, Plato, my students, will defend me, will stand up for me, but a lot of other people will reject me, and I am fine with that. I can still be the person who I am.
Yeah. Thank you, Patricia.
You're welcome.